The alarm screamed through the Galactic Council monitoring station like a wounded animal. Commander Zethara dropped his morning nutrition cube and rushed to the main console. His blue-scaled hands moved quickly across the controls as red warning lights painted the room in an angry glow. "What do we have?" he asked his assistant, a young Velkin named Kira. "Distress signal from the outer rim, sir. Coordinates show the Tau Ceti system." Kira's voice shook as she read the data. "The signal is, it's bad, Commander." Zethara pulled up the transmission on his screen. Static filled most of it, but some words came through clear enough to make his blood run cold. "Colony under attack. Unknown hostiles. Losing life support. Please anyone." The voice belonged to a human. It cracked with fear and pain. "Atmosphere venting. Hull breach in sections 4 through 7. They're cutting through our defenses like paper." More static. Then silence. The commander stared at the screen for a long moment. In his 20 years of service, he had heard many distress calls. Pirates, system failures, natural disasters. But this felt different. This felt like something much worse. "Send word to the council," he said quietly. "Emergency session. Priority Alpha." Kira nodded and began typing. As she worked, Zethara played the message again. And again. Each time, the human's voice seemed more desperate, more afraid. 2 hours later, the great council chamber buzzed with worried voices. Representatives from dozens of worlds filled the circular room. At the center sat the 5 permanent members of the Inner Council. Ambassador Thrix of the Aquatic Confederation was the first to speak. His gill slits fluttered with agitation as he addressed the room. "Fellow councilors, we have received a distress call from a human colony ship in the Tau Ceti system. The transmission suggests they are under attack by unknown forces." A ripple of concern passed through the chamber. The insectoid representative, Zakth, clicked his mandibles together in thought. "Unknown forces," Zakth said, his voice buzzing like static. "In our records, there are no hostile species in that sector. This could be a trap." "A trap?" Thrix's voice rose higher. "You heard the transmission. That was real fear, real panic." "Humans are clever," said Counselor Vex, a plant-like being whose leaves rustled when he spoke. "They have been known to exaggerate situations for their benefit." This brought murmurs of agreement from several representatives. The humans were still new to the galactic community. They had only made contact 15 years ago, and their reputation was mixed at best. Commander Zethara stepped forward to address the council. "With respect, counselors, I have been monitoring communications for 2 decades. What I heard on that transmission was genuine terror. No one acts fear that well." "But humans come from a death world," said Counselor Yara, a small gray being with large black eyes. "They are used to danger. If they are afraid, what does that say about what they are facing?" The chamber fell quiet. Everyone knew about Earth, a world so hostile that most galactic species needed protective suits just to visit the surface. Crushing gravity, poisonous atmosphere, deadly weather, and creatures that could kill in dozens of ways. The fact that an intelligent species had evolved there at all was considered miraculous. "We need more information," Zakth buzzed. "I suggest we send a reconnaissance fleet to investigate." "And if it is a trap?" asked Vex. "Then we send ships that can defend themselves," Thrix replied. "But we cannot ignore a distress call. It goes against everything the Council stands for." The debate continued for another hour. Some wanted to send a full battle fleet. Others suggested ignoring the call completely. Finally, they reached a compromise. "We will send 3 ships," announced Council Leader Drac, an elderly being whose species had founded the Council centuries ago. "Light cruisers with diplomatic immunity markings. They will investigate and report back. If the humans are in genuine danger, we will discuss further action." It was a typical council decision, careful, measured, and probably too little too late. But it was something. As the representatives filed out of the chamber, Zethara lingered behind. Something about the distress call bothered him. Not just the fear in the human's voice, but something else. Something he could not quite identify. He returned to his station and played the message one more time. This time he listened carefully to the background noise. Behind the human's voice he could hear other sounds. Metal being cut, energy weapons firing, and something else. A chittering, clicking sound that made his scales crawl. Zethara had heard many alien languages in his career. But this sound was different. It was not language at all. It was more like insects. Very large insects. He pulled up the star charts for the Tau Ceti system. The human colony ship New Horizon had been traveling there for over a year. It was supposed to be a routine colonization mission. 50,000 humans in suspended animation, heading to establish a new world. But according to the charts, there were no other ships in that system. No space stations, no mining operations, nothing. So where had the attackers come from? Zethara made a decision that would haunt him for weeks to come. He marked the file as routine investigation instead of immediate threat. It was a small thing, but it meant the reconnaissance fleet would take the standard route instead of the emergency jump corridor. It would cost them 6 hours. 6 hours that might make all the difference. The next morning, Captain Veltar of the Harmony's Voice received his orders. He was a veteran explorer, comfortable with the unknown. His ship and 2 others would jump to Tau Ceti, investigate the distress call and report back. Probably another human misunderstanding, his first officer Nira said as they prepared for jump. You know how they are. They see a meteor shower and think they are under attack. Veltar was not so sure. He had met humans before, during the first contact ceremonies. They had seemed competent, careful. Not the type to panic over nothing, but orders were orders. The 3 ships engaged their jump drives and vanished into hyperspace, heading for Tau Ceti system. Behind them, on the monitoring station, Commander Zethara tried to push away his growing unease. He had made the right choice. The Council's decision was reasonable and measured. But as he stared at the star chart, marking the reconnaissance fleet's progress toward Tau Ceti, he could not shake the feeling that they were already too late. The distress call had come in 18 hours ago. In that time, anything could have happened to the New Horizon and her 50,000 sleeping passengers. Somewhere in the depths of space, Captain Veltar's ships jumped toward what they thought would be a routine investigation. None of them knew they were flying into the jaws of something that had come from beyond the edge of the galaxy. Something that had been waiting in the darkness between stars for exactly this opportunity. Something that saw the peaceful galaxy not as neighbors to trade with, but as food to be harvested. Captain Veltar felt his stomach twist as his ship dropped out of hyperspace. The Harmony's Voice shuddered slightly as its engines powered down from jump speed. Around him, the bridge crew worked at their stations, running standard arrival checks. Sensor sweep complete, announced his science officer, Jorik. I'm reading, Captain. You need to see this. The main screen flickered to life, showing the Tau Ceti system. At first, everything looked normal. A yellow star, several planets, and the usual collection of asteroids and debris that filled most systems. Then Veltar saw it. Floating in the darkness like a wounded giant was the human colony ship New Horizon. Even from this distance, he could see the damage. Huge gashes ran along its hull, and debris floated around it like metal snow. By the ancestors, whispered Nira, his first officer. What happened to them? Are there any life signs? Veltar asked. Jorik worked frantically at his console. The ship's hull is blocking most scans, but I'm picking up some energy readings. Minimal power, emergency systems only. If there are survivors, they're running on backup life support. Veltar nodded grimly. Signal the other ships. We go in slow and careful. Full shields, weapons ready. Sir? Nira looked surprised. This is a rescue mission. Look at that damage, Veltar pointed at the screen. Those are weapon burns. Something attacked them and we don't know if it's still here. The 3 council ships moved toward the New Horizon in formation. As they got closer, the damage became worse. Entire sections of the colony ship had been torn away. Atmosphere vents and frozen gases sparkled in the starlight like deadly crystals. I've never seen weapon damage like this, Jorik said, studying his readings. The cuts are too clean for energy weapons, but too precise for kinetic rounds. It's like something just sliced through their armor. Veltar was about to respond when every alarm on the bridge started screaming at once. Contact, Jorik shouted. Multiple contacts. They're coming out of the asteroid belt. The main screen switched to tactical view. Red dots appeared at the edge of the system, dozens of them. No, hundreds. As Veltar watched in horror, more kept appearing. What are those ships? Nira asked. I've never seen designs like that. The approaching vessels looked like someone had crossed a spaceship with a giant insect. They had long, curved hulls that bent and twisted like spider legs. Their surfaces gleamed with a dark, organic sheen that reflected starlight in disturbing ways. Running them through the database, Jorik said, his voice tight with fear. No match. These ships aren't in any of our records. Unknown vessels. Veltar broadcast on all frequencies. This is Captain Veltar of the Galactic Council ship Harmony's voice. You are entering a rescue operation area. Please identify yourselves and state your intentions. The response came immediately, but not in words. The alien ship suddenly accelerated, moving faster than anything that size should be able to move. They swarmed toward the Council ships like angry wasps. Evasive action, Veltar ordered. All ships, combat formation. But the Council ships were built for diplomacy and exploration, not war. Their shields were designed to protect against space debris, not weapon strikes. Their guns were meant for asteroid mining and emergency defense. The first alien ship reached the Concorde, one of Veltar's escort vessels. Instead of firing weapons, it did something much worse. It latched onto the Council ship's hull with what looked like massive claws, then began cutting through the armor with beams of energy that carved through metal like a hot knife through soft wax. Concorde is reporting hull breaches. Nira shouted over the noise of alarms. They're being boarded! Through the view screen, Veltar could see creatures moving across the surface of his escort ship. They looked like insects the size of ground cars, with too many legs and mandibles that gleamed like metal blades. The radio crackled with panic from the Concorde's captain. They're inside. They're cutting through our blast doors like paper. My crew? Oh, ancestors, what are they doing to my crew? Then the transmission cut to screaming, then to silence. The Concorde has gone dark, Jorik reported, his voice barely above a whisper. More alien ships swarmed toward the remaining Council vessels. Veltar watched helplessly as his second escort, the Pride of Vega, tried to run. It made it almost 1,000 kilometers before the aliens caught up. This time, instead of boarding, they simply tore the ship apart. The alien vessels surrounded the Pride of Vega and began cutting it into pieces with those same energy beams. The Council ship's shields collapsed in seconds. Its hull split open like a flower, spilling atmosphere and bodies into space. How many of them are there? Veltar asked. I've stopped counting at 300, Jorik replied. And more keep coming. The alien swarm was almost upon them now. Veltar could see details on their ships that made his blood run cold. The hulls weren't just insect-like. They were covered with what looked like organic components, as if the ships were partially alive. Captain, Nira said quietly, we need to run. Veltar knew she was right. They had no chance against this swarm, but they also had a duty to report what they had found. If these creatures were spreading through the galaxy, the Council needed to know. Prepare a data burst, he ordered. Full tactical scan everything we've recorded. Send it to Council headquarters on maximum priority. But the hyperspace communicator will take 30 seconds to charge. Jorik protested. They'll reach us before then. Then we hold them off for 30 seconds. Veltar turned the Harmony's voice toward the approaching swarm and fired everything he had. His mining lasers and defensive cannons lit up space with energy beams. For a moment he thought they might actually damage one of the alien ships. Then the return fire came. The aliens didn't use energy weapons or missiles. They fired something that looked like living metal, projectiles that moved like serpents through space, seeking their target with intelligence and purpose. The first one hit the Harmony's voice near the engine section. Instead of exploding, it burrowed into the hull and began spreading like a disease. Veltar watched in horror as his ship's own metal began turning against itself, twisting and growing in impossible directions. 20 seconds, Jorik called out. More of the living metal projectiles struck home. The bridge shook as something began cutting through the deck below them. Emergency lights flickered as systems failed throughout the ship. 10 seconds! Through the forward view screen, Veltar could see the alien ship surrounding them. Up close, he could make out details that would haunt his final moments. The ships had what looked like eyes scattered across their hulls, and those eyes were looking at him. 5 seconds. The cutting sounds below grew louder. Something was almost through the deck. Something with too many legs and mandibles like swords. Transmitting now, the hyperspace communicator discharged its message in a burst of energy that would cross the galaxy in hours instead of days. Somewhere far away, the Council would receive Veltar's final report. They would learn about the swarm, about the ships that looked like insects, about the creatures that cut through starship hulls like they were made of paper. The deck exploded upward as the first alien creature broke through. Veltar had one last glimpse of something that belonged in nightmares, a thing of chitin and metal and hunger that moved with terrible purpose. His final transmission was cut short. But enough got through, Council Command. Skarn Swarm confirmed. Estimated fleet size 300 vessels. Colony ship inhabitants unknown status. We are static filled the channel. Then silence. In the depths of space, the alien swarm continued its work. They stripped the Council ships down to bare metal, harvesting every useful component. The organic parts, the crews, were processed differently. The swarm had learned long ago that organic matter, especially brain tissue, contained valuable information. Navigation charts, technology specifications, cultural knowledge, all of it could be extracted and absorbed. By the time they were finished, 3 Council ships had become part of the swarm's knowledge base. And that knowledge told them something very useful. This galaxy was full of soft, peaceful species who had forgotten how to fight. The harvest would be easier than they had hoped. The emergency klaxon echoed through the Council headquarters for the 3rd time in 2 days. Commander Zethara ran down the corridor toward the main chamber, his scaled feet clicking on the polished floor. Other officials rushed past him, all heading in the same direction. Something was very wrong. He burst through the chamber doors to find chaos. Representatives from dozens of worlds were shouting at each other in a dozen different languages. At the center of it all, Council Leader Drax stood with his hands raised, trying to restore order. Silence. Drax's voice boomed through the chamber's speakers. Silence. The noise gradually died down. Zethara found a seat near the back and listened as Ambassador Thrix stepped forward, his usually blue skin pale with fear. Fellow councilors, Thrix began, his voice shaking. 3 hours ago, we lost contact with our reconnaissance fleet in the Tau Ceti system. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Losing contact was not unusual. Hyperspace communications could be unreliable. But the look on Thrix's face suggested something much worse. Before we lost contact, Captain Veltar managed to transmit a partial report. Thrix activated the main display screen. What you are about to see is disturbing. The screen filled with images from the Harmony's voice sensor logs. Zethara gasped as he saw the human colony ship New Horizon, torn and bleeding atmosphere into space. Then came the alien vessels, things that looked like giant insects made of dark metal and nightmares. The captain's final transmission identified these creatures as the Skarn Swarm. Thrix continued. Before the signal cut out, he estimated over 300 vessels. All 3 of our ships are presumed destroyed. The chamber erupted again. This time, Drac did not try to restore order immediately. He looked as shaken as everyone else. Counselor Zaxth was the first to speak when the noise died down. These Skarn are not in our databases. Where did they come from? Analysis of their ship configuration suggests extragalactic origin, replied the Council's head scientist, a thin being named Dr. Kell. They appear to have come from outside our galaxy entirely. But that's impossible, protested Counselor Vex. Nothing can survive. The void between galaxies. Apparently, something can, Dr. Kell said grimly. And now it's here. More reports began flooding in. Scout ships from border systems had detected similar vessels in 4 other sectors. The Skarn were not just in Tau Ceti, they were spreading. Admiral Korath, the Council's military commander, stood up from his seat. His people, the Drakmari, were one of the few warrior species in the Council, but even he looked worried. I am mobilizing the combined fleet immediately, he announced. Every available warship from every member world. We will meet this threat with overwhelming force. How long will that take? Asked Counselor Yara. To gather ships from all member worlds and coordinate their different technologies? 6 weeks minimum. 6 weeks? Thrix's voice cracked. We may not have 6 days. As if to prove his point, another report arrived. The Skarn had been detected in the Rigel system, home to 12 billion Aquatic Confederation citizens. They're moving toward the core worlds, Admiral Korath said, studying the tactical displays. This isn't random raiding. They're following our shipping lanes, our communication networks. They know where our population centers are. The implications hit everyone at once. Somehow the Skarn had learned about galactic civilization structure. They were not just attacking, they were systematically hunting. Dr. Kell activated another display, showing what little they had learned about Skarn technology. Their ships appear to be partially organic. Our sensors detected biosignatures mixed with traditional metal construction. And their weapons, he paused, looking sick. Their weapons don't just destroy. They harvest. What do you mean, harvest? Drac asked. The few surviving signals we've received suggest they're taking prisoners, but not for slavery or ransom. They seem to be extracting information directly from brain tissue. The chamber fell silent. Every counselor understood what that meant. The Skarn were not just invaders. They were learning everything about their victims. Ship designs, defensive strategies, population centers, trade routes. With each attack, they became more dangerous. We need to evacuate the border systems, Counselor Vex said. Get our people away from the front lines. Evacuate to where? Admiral Korath shot back. If they're learning our ship movements, nowhere is safe. And we don't have enough ships to move billions of people. The debate raged for another hour. Some wanted to fight, others wanted to hide. A few suggested trying to negotiate, though no one could explain how to talk to creatures that literally ate brains for information. Finally, Counselor Yara raised a small hand. There is another option. The chamber grew quiet. Everyone knew what she was going to suggest, but no one wanted to hear it. The humans, she said simply. The silence stretched on. Finally, Counselor Vex spoke up. The humans are barely civilized. They've been in space for less than 2 centuries. What could they possibly do against this threat? They come from a death world, Yara replied. They understand violence in ways we do not. That's exactly why we shouldn't trust them, Zacht buzzed angrily. They solve everything with force. They have wars over resources, territory, even ideas. Do we really want to unleash that kind of thinking on this situation? Ambassador Thrix looked thoughtful. The humans did volunteer to help with the Proxima Centauri pirates last year. Their methods were effective. They destroyed 3 pirate bases and captured the rest. Admiral Korath admitted reluctantly. It took them 2 weeks to accomplish what we had been trying to do for 6 months. Because they didn't bother with trials or negotiations, Vex protested. They just attacked everything that looked dangerous. And it worked, Thrix pointed out. Commander Zethara stood up from his seat in the back. As the one who had first received the human distress call, he felt responsible for what was happening. Counselors, he said, we are debating the humans' methods while our people are being slaughtered. Yes, they are aggressive. Yes, they solve problems with violence. But right now we need someone who knows how to fight. The debate continued for another 30 minutes, but the outcome was inevitable. Every peaceful solution they proposed would take too long. Every military plan required resources they did not have. Finally, Council Leader Drac called for a vote. All in favor of requesting human military assistance? Hands went up slowly around the chamber. Some counselors looked ashamed of their choice. Others looked relieved. But in the end, the vote was unanimous. Very well, Drac said. Commander Zethara, you will compose the message. Make it clear that we are facing an extinction-level threat, and make it clear that we will accept whatever help they offer, no matter how uncomfortable their methods might make us. Zethara nodded and headed for the communications center. As he walked, he wondered if they were making the right choice. The humans had a reputation for solving problems with overwhelming force. They did not negotiate with enemies. They simply destroyed them. But as he sat down at the communications console and began typing, Zethara realized that was exactly what the galaxy needed right now. Someone who would not hesitate, would not debate, would not waste time trying to understand their enemy's motivations. Someone who would simply fight. The message was short and simple. To Earth Command, from the Galactic Council. We are under attack by an unknown species designated Skarn Swarm. Estimated threat level, extinction of all galactic civilization. Request immediate military assistance. Coordinates and tactical data attached. Time is critical. He paused, then added one final line. We know your people understand war. Please help us. The message shot across space at faster than light speed, carrying with it the hopes and fears of 1,000 worlds. Somewhere in the Sol system, human military commanders would receive it and make their own choice. Zethara just hoped they would choose to help, and not to let the galaxy burn while they protected only themselves. Because if the humans said no, there was no one else to ask. Admiral Sarah Chen stood in the command center of Earth's orbital defense station, watching the alien message decode on the main screen. Around her, dozens of officers and analysts worked at their stations, their faces lit by the glow of displays showing tactical data from across the galaxy. Play it again, she ordered. The message repeated on the speakers. the alien voice crackling through the translation software. When it finished, the command center was quiet except for the hum of computers processing the attached data files. Analysis? Chen asked. Colonel Martinez, her chief intelligence officer, stepped forward. The data checks out, Admiral. Multiple sources confirm massive alien fleet movements in the Outer Rim territories. Ship designs unknown, origin unknown. But the damage patterns... He paused, bringing up images on the main screen. Ma'am, these aren't just attacks. This is systematic harvesting. Chen studied the pictures of destroyed council ships. Clean cuts through armor plating, precision strikes on critical systems, and evidence of boarding actions. But what caught her attention was something else entirely. They're learning, she said quietly. Ma'am, Martinez looked confused. Look at the attack patterns. First ship they hit, they used brute force, overwhelmed it with numbers. Second ship, they used targeted strikes on engines and weapons. Third ship, they didn't even bother fighting. They just disabled it and took it apart piece by piece. Chen turned to face her staff. This enemy adapts. Every encounter makes them smarter, more efficient. The Council's reconnaissance fleet didn't just get destroyed, they got studied. Major Park, the xenobiology specialist, raised her hand. Admiral, the biological analysis is disturbing. The Skarn ships appear to be part organic, part machine. And the reports about brain harvesting, they're not just killing, Chen finished. They're downloading everything their victims know. The implications were clear to everyone in the room. Every human ship, every human colony, every piece of human technology the Skarn encountered would become part of their knowledge base. Recommendations? Chen asked. General Thompson, head of Colonial Defense Forces, spoke first. We evacuate our outer colonies immediately. Pull back to defendable positions and wait for them to come to us. That won't work, Colonel Martinez objected. Every system they take makes them stronger. Eventually they'll have enough resources to overwhelm any defense. Then we hit them first, said Captain Rodriguez from the Navy. Strike their forward bases before they can consolidate. Chen listened to the debate for several minutes, then held up her hand for silence. All good ideas, but you're missing something important. What did the Council call us? The room was quiet. Finally, Major Park spoke up. Deathworlders, ma'am. That's right. They asked the Deathworlders for help. Chen smiled grimly. They didn't ask for our diplomats or our scientists or our negotiators. They asked for the people who evolved on a planet that tries to kill everything that lives on it. She walked to the main display and pulled up Earth's file from the Galactic database. Gravity 3 times standard. Atmosphere that's poisonous to most species. Weather patterns that can kill. Predators, diseases, natural disasters. And in the middle of all that death, humanity not only survived, we thrived. Chen turned back to her staff. The Council species evolved on gentle worlds. When they face a threat, their first instinct is to talk, to negotiate, to find a peaceful solution. That's not wrong. It's what made their civilization possible. She activated another display showing human military history. Ancient battles, world wars, the colonial expansion conflicts. But we're different. We evolved to fight everything. Our environment, our predators, and each other. War isn't something we do when diplomacy fails. War is how we solve existential problems. The room was silent as Chen's words sank in. Around them, data continued streaming in from across the galaxy. More Skarn sightings, more attacks, more systems going dark. Orders, Admiral? General Thompson asked. Chen was quiet for a moment, studying the tactical displays. The Skarn were following predictable patterns, hitting isolated targets, learning from each encounter, gradually moving toward population centers. It was efficient, logical, and exactly what she would expect from a hive mind. It was also exactly the wrong way to fight humans. Mobilize the Colonial Defense Fleet, she ordered. Every ship, every crew, everything we've got. I want battle groups Alpha through Delta ready for departure in 6 hours. All of them? Captain Rodriguez looked surprised. That will leave Earth defenseless. Earth isn't in danger, Chen replied. Yet, but 50,000 humans in the Tau Ceti system are, and I'll be damned if we're going to let them die because we were too cautious. The staff began moving, issuing orders and coordinating the massive mobilization effort. As they worked, Chen pulled up the files on the New Horizon colony ship. 50,000 people. Families mostly. Children in suspended animation. Dreaming of their new world while their ship drifted powerless in space. The Skarn had been using the colony ship as bait, she realized. Waiting to see what kind of response it would draw. They were about to find out. Admiral, Major Park approached with a data pad. I've been analyzing the Skarn ship configurations. Their organic components suggest they might be vulnerable to biological agents, chemical weapons. Chen shook her head. Too unpredictable and too slow. By the time we develop something effective, they'll have adapted. What about psychological warfare? Suggested Colonel Martinez. If they're a hive mind, disrupting their communications might... No. Chen's voice was firm. We're not going to outthink them. We're not going to outadapt them. And we're sure as hell not going to try to negotiate with them. She turned to face the assembled officers. The council asked for Deathworlders because they need someone who knows how to kill things that are trying to kill them. That's what we do. That's what we've always done. General Thompson nodded slowly. Standard human doctrine. When something threatens you, you kill it. When something threatens your family, you kill it and everything it came from. Exactly. The Skarn have made this personal by attacking our colony ship. They've made it worse by threatening our allies. And they've made it fatal for themselves by assuming they understand how humans fight. Chen activated the fleet communication system, broadcasting to every ship preparing to depart. Thousands of human sailors, marines, and pilots listened as their admiral explained the situation. People, we're heading into the unknown against an enemy that adapts to everything they encounter. They've destroyed every fleet sent against them so far. They learn from their victories and use that knowledge to become stronger. She paused, looking around the command center. But they've never fought humans before. They don't know that we don't adapt, we overwhelm. They don't know that we don't retreat. We advance until the enemy is dead. And they sure as hell don't know what happens when you threaten human civilians. Across the fleet, crews prepared their ships for departure. Weapons were loaded, shields were charged, and battle plans were distributed. But Chen knew that all the technology and preparation in the galaxy wouldn't matter if her people weren't mentally ready for what they were about to face. The Skarn think they understand warfare because they've beaten species that fight like them methodically, logically, efficiently. But we don't fight like that. We fight like the products of a world that's been trying to kill us since we first stood upright. The fleet was ready. 12 battle groups, each built around a heavy cruiser or battleship. Destroyers, frigates, assault transports, and support vessels. The largest human fleet ever assembled, heading for their first real interstellar war. The council called us Deathworlders, Chen said as the first ships began their jump sequence. Let's show them what that means. One by one, the human ships vanished into hyperspace, carrying with them something the Skarn had never encountered before. An enemy that had evolved not to adapt to threats, but to eliminate them completely. In the depths of space, sensors detected the hyperspace signatures and began tracking their destination. The Skarn collective mind processed this information with interest. More prey was coming to them, apparently from the same species as the colony ship they had been harvesting. They would learn much from these new specimens. Their knowledge would make the collective stronger, more efficient, more deadly. It never occurred to the Skarn that some species didn't fight to learn or adapt or survive. Some species fought to win. No matter what the cost, they were about to learn the difference. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation, 12 battle groups materializing in the Tau Ceti system like avenging angels. Admiral Chen stood on the bridge of her flagship, the Terra's Wrath, watching as her sensors painted a picture of the battlefield. Tactical report, she ordered. Commander Hayes, her tactical officer, looked up from his displays. Ma'am, we have visual on the new horizon. She's still intact, but powerless. I'm reading minimal life support signatures. The colonists are alive, but barely. And our uninvited guests? Skarn vessels numbering approximately 800, arranged in a defensive sphere around the colony ship. Admiral, they're not moving to attack. They're just sitting there watching us. Chen studied the tactical display. The Skarn ships hung in space like a swarm of metal insects, their organic hulls gleaming darkly in the system's yellow sun. They had positioned themselves perfectly to use the colony ship as a shield. They're learning, she murmured. They've fought the council fleets and learned that most species won't fire if there's a chance of hitting civilians. Orders, Admiral? Asked Captain Morrison, her flag captain. Chen smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. They picked the wrong species to try that tactic on. All ships, Battle Formation Omega. Prepare to execute Operation Deathworld. Around her, the bridge crew began working with practiced efficiency. Operation Deathworld was a human military doctrine, that would have horrified the peaceful council species. It was based on a simple principle. When the enemy uses your morality as a weapon, you show them why that's a mistake. The human fleet spread out into a complex three-dimensional formation that surrounded the Skarn swarm. To an outside observer, it might have looked like the humans were preparing for a siege. The Skarn collective seemed to think so too. Their ships remained motionless, confident that the humans wouldn't risk the colony ship. They were wrong. All ships report ready. Admiral, Commander Hayes announced. Execute Operation Deathworld. Authorization Chen Alpha 7. The first phase began immediately. Every human ship launched a full spread of missiles, but not at the Skarn vessels. Instead, they fired at specific points in space, around the colony ship, positions calculated to create precise gravitational effects when the missiles detonated. The Skarn collective watched with interest as hundreds of human missiles flew past their ships without attacking. Clearly, these new prey were trying some sort of rescue operation. They would wait, learn from whatever tactic the humans attempted, then add it to their knowledge base. The missiles detonated simultaneously, their nuclear warheads creating brief stars in the darkness. But the explosions weren't meant to cause damage. They were meant to create gravitational waves that would push the colony ship away from the Skarn formation. Slowly, majestically, the New Horizon began to drift away from its captors. Colony ship is clear of the engagement zone, Hayes reported. Distance and increasing. Phase 2, Chen ordered. This time the human ships did fire at the Skarn, but not with the precise targeted attacks the aliens had come to expect from other species. Instead, they fired everything at once: energy weapons, kinetic rounds, plasma cannons, and more missiles. The human doctrine was simple. If you want to kill something, use enough firepower to kill 10 of them. The Skarn shields absorbed most of the barrage, just as their collective mind had calculated. But the humans weren't trying to break through the shields, no. They were trying to overload them. And when 800 Skarn ships tried to maintain defensive shields against the concentrated fire of 40 human warships, something had to give. Enemy shields are fluctuating, Hayes called out. Some of their smaller vessels are showing hull damage. The Skarn collective processed this new information with growing interest. These humans fought differently from other species. Instead of trying to minimize casualties and collateral damage, they seemed to prioritize maximum destruction. It was inefficient, wasteful, but undeniably effective. They began to adapt, redirecting power from non-essential systems to strengthen their shields. Some ships moved to protect damaged vessels while others prepared to launch their own counterattack, but the humans weren't finished. Phase 3, Chen announced. All ships ramming speed. Around the bridge, several officers looked uncomfortable. Phase 3 of Operation Deathworld was the part that other species found incomprehensible. It was the part that earned humans their reputation as dangerous fanatics. The human ships accelerated directly toward the Skarn formation. To the collective mind, this made no sense. Ramming attacks were suicide tactics, only used by desperate enemies with no other options. But the humans had other options. They could have continued the long-range bombardment, or attempted to outmaneuver the Skarn ships, or even retreated to fight another day. Instead, they charged. The Terra's Wrath led the attack, her massive bulk accelerating toward the center of the Skarn formation. Behind her, destroyers and cruisers followed in tight formation, their engines pushed beyond safe limits. At the last second, when collision seemed inevitable, the human ships did something unexpected. They didn't ram the Skarn vessels. They rammed through them. The Terra's Wrath's reinforced bow punched through the hull of a Skarn command ship like a spear through paper. The alien vessel split in half, its organic components writhing in death throes as vacuum claimed its crew. But the human dreadnought didn't stop. She continued through the formation, her guns firing at point-blank range into every Skarn ship she passed. Behind her, smaller human vessels followed the hole she had torn in the enemy formation. They fired as they went, not bothering to aim carefully but simply pouring destructive energy into anything that looked like a target. The Skarn collective had never encountered tactics like this. Most species tried to preserve their ships, viewing them as valuable resources to be protected. But the humans seemed to treat their vessels as expendable weapons, willing to sacrifice them for tactical advantage. Hull breaches on decks 4 through 7, reported the Terra's Wrath's damage control officer. But we're still operational. Keep firing, Chen ordered. All weapons, continuous barrage. The human ships tore through the Skarn formation like sharks through a school of fish. Where Council vessels had been methodically destroyed by overwhelming numbers, the human fleet carved a path of destruction through enemy lines by simply refusing to stop or retreat. But the Skarn were learning. Their collective mind began to adapt, coordinating their response to counter human tactics. They began targeting human engines, trying to stop the devastating ramming attacks. They deployed new weapons, ones that had proven effective against other species. That's when they made their fatal mistake. Some of the Skarn ships launched boarding pods, trying to capture human vessels the same way they had captured Council ships. The organic pods latched onto human hulls and began cutting through armor with the same energy. Beams that had sliced through alien defenses like butter. They broke through into the human ships and found something, waiting for them that they had never encountered before. Human marines. The Skarn boarding creatures were the size of ground vehicles, armored in chitinous plates that could deflect energy weapons, armed with claws and mandibles that could cut through starship bulkheads. They had overwhelmed every other species they had encountered. They had never fought something that had evolved on a world where everything was trying to kill it. Sergeant Rodriguez met the first boarding creature in the Terra's Wrath's main corridor. The Skarn warrior was 3 times his size, armed with natural weapons that could slice through steel, and backed by a collective intelligence that had conquered dozens of worlds. Rodriguez shot it in the face with a shotgun loaded with depleted uranium rounds, then threw a grenade into the hole the first blast had made. The explosion echoed through the ship's corridors as Rodriguez's squad moved up to support him. They had trained for this scenario their entire careers, fighting in close quarters against an enemy that wanted to capture them alive. "Contact in Section 7, came the radio call. "Multiple hostiles requesting backup." "Negative," Rodriguez replied as he reloaded his weapon. "We don't need backup. We need more targets." Throughout the human fleet, similar battles raged in corridors and cargo bays. The Skarn boarding creatures found themselves fighting an enemy that didn't retreat, didn't surrender, and didn't show mercy. Human marines fought with a ferocity that the collective mind found difficult to comprehend. These creatures seemed to actually enjoy combat. In space, the battle continued to rage. The human fleet had taken heavy casualties, but they had also torn the heart out of the Skarn formation. Dozens of alien ships drifted powerless, their organic components dead or dying. "Admiral," Commander Hayes called out, "we're receiving a transmission from the New Horizon. Captain Williams reports they've restored minimal power and are beginning emergency repairs." Chen nodded, but her attention was focused on the tactical display. The Skarn were regrouping, trying to coordinate a counterattack. They had adapted to human ramming tactics and were now using focused fire to destroy human ships before they could close to melee range. It was time for the final phase. "All ships," Chen broadcast across the fleet, "initiate Deathworld Protocol 7.